Okay, we invite on stage Sandeep Unnithan, journalist and author, Shiv Aroor, journalist and author.
Should we just wait for 2-3 more minutes for everyone to come in? Okay. I am just showing respect for the audience, that's all. Because a lot of people outside said we're here for the 2611 session, so that's why. Good evening, everyone. Great to be here, and this is a session I've been looking forward to very greatly. I have been looking forward to the others as well. I'm just saying that this is something that's extremely close to my heart, both professionally and emotionally, as it is with my co-panelist and dear friend and colleague of many years, Sandeep Unnithan. Just before I start, I wanted to say that both Sandeep and I are very closely linked with 2611 professionally in terms of me having covered it personally. It was one of my first reporting assignments as a young TV reporter in 2008. And Sandeep actually wrote the most definitive account of what happened in 2611. It's a book that's available outside. If any of you are even remotely interested in India's worst recent terror attack, I would urge you to pick up this book because it's a truly fascinating account of what happened those days. And this book especially means a great deal to me because it answers some of the questions that I had when I was reporting about 2611. How could such a thing happen? How could such a country with such a big intelligence setup, large military, coastal assets, etc., how could a country fall victim to 10 guys with guns coming by boat, right? So it was it's something that in many ways shaped me as a journalist. It is something that Sandeep has been an expert at for years and years because Mumbai is actually his city. He grew up in Mumbai. He's very closely linked to everything to do with the Navy. He comes from a Navy family himself. So Sandeep, good to have you here.
Great to be here, Shiv.
We're going to keep this very conversational, and I've been told by a lot of people, Sandeep, to reserve at least 15 minutes for question and answers because they said that if we don't give them some audience time, they won't let us leave. So some question and answers will happen at the end. So
yeah, thanks very much, Shiv. It's great to be here and great to be on this panel with you. Shiv and me go back many years at India Today. But before that, I want to tell you about conversation something like 20 years back when I was in India Today magazine, and my editor said, I thought I was, India Today, the Mumbai bureau was the best place in the world. And my editor in Delhi felt otherwise. And he said that, what are you doing in Bombay? You write on defense, you should be in Delhi. And he was my managing editor in India Today magazine, and that's Swapan sir. He's right here in the audience. So it's an absolute honor to be here. Thank you for coming here for this. And I can safely say that but for that move that he literally yanked me out of the backwaters of Mumbai and brought me into Delhi, and that was 20 years ago. But for that move, I wouldn't have written any books. I'm pretty sure about it because coming to Delhi changed my perspective on defense and national security. So, I mean, it's an absolute honor to see you here today, sir.
Mumbai's loss was Delhi's gain, but Sandeep still wrote the most authoritative account of what happened on 2611. Sandeep, I'll start with the first question, and we can both talk about it freewheelingly. I think a question, since the topic of this discussion is 2611, 15 years later. 15 years is a long time, but it's also not such a long time. It's enough time to afford us the luxury of hindsight in terms of asking a question that I want you to answer because you wrote this book 10 years after 2611. 15 years later, Sandeep, how much more difficult would it be for Pakistan to mount a 2611 on India?
Very good question, Shiv. And before we talk about this, since we are on the 15th anniversary of 2611, I want to take you back to the road that we traveled till we arrived at 26/11. And the road begins with 1947, right? There's partition, India and Pakistan. And suddenly you have tribal raiders coming into Jammu and Kashmir. And these so-called tribal raiders are actually led by the Pakistan military. And you have the first Jammu and Kashmir war that breaks out between India and Pakistan, which Pakistan doesn't acknowledge until today. 1962, fast forward, I'm just moving forward, there are a lot of dates here, just to give you an idea of how the run-up to 26/11. 1962, border war between India and China. India is defeated. It sets in pace into motion a defense reorganization, a rearming, and Pakistan sees a window of opportunity closing. So it launches Operation Gibraltar, one last attempt to get Jammu and Kashmir. And one of the aspects of Operation Gibraltar is this covert mission when they launch so-called Mujahideen, which are actually, again, Pakistan military into Jammu and Kashmir. It's foiled, of course, full-scale war breaks out. 1971, the Pakistan military carries out one of the 4 or 5 genocides of the 20th century in East Pakistan. India intervenes, raises the Mukti Bahini, and before you know it, the free nation of Bangladesh is created. And then after 1971, there are 2 very important dates, 3 actually. 1977 is the military coup in Pakistan, when General Zia takes over. And when General Zia takes the country over, Pakistan military gets into the driver's seat, he also captures the nuclear weapons program. And this is the nuclear weapons program that Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had nurtured. And he wanted to use that to kind of curtail the Pakistan military's control over the country. And they did a double game on him, and they captured the military weapons program, the nuclear weapons program. 1979, the Soviet Union invades Afghanistan. Pakistan becomes a frontline state in the war against the Soviet Union. And the nuclear weapons program, the Americans look away from the nuclear weapons program. They say, listen, it's okay if they have it. There are some very influential people in the US establishment who believe that it's in their interest to have a nuclear armed Pakistan because it's a bulwark against the Soviet Union. And in 79, 80, you have Operation Cyclone, which is a CIA-sponsored arming of the Mujahideen, which is like literally billions of dollars worth of weaponry, arms, ammunition, Stinger missiles from all over the world brought in to fight the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. And then you go forward to 1983, when, and you're almost a decade after that 71 war, when the Pakistan military sustains a huge psychological defeat. And in 1983, what happens is that Pakistan begins enriching uranium to the point when they can make a bomb. The Pakistan nuclear weapon, the Islamic bomb, is a reality, and that's made a reality by Chinese transfer of blueprints and know-how and missiles. This is the only recorded instance of one nuclear weapon state actually creating another nuclear weapon state. North Korea is possibly a second such example if the Chinese have done. And what happens to Pakistan is that there is a sea change in their whole attitude to geopolitics from then on. Nuclear weapons brings in a newfound sense of confidence in them. It's almost like all those movies where you see this guy get stabbed by bitten by a radioactive spider and he turns into Spider-Man, right? So the Pakistan army suddenly becomes big, and it starts thinking big, saying that finally we've got it. We've, figured out the perfect formula. And what is that perfect formula? It's nuclear weapons enabled terrorism. NWET. It's the only such instance of nuclear weapons enabled terrorism anywhere in the world. And it's very simple. The shield of nuclear weapons, they have a sword of terrorism, which they inflict 1,000 cuts on you. And that sword of terrorism is protected by the shield of nuclear weapons. Meaning which they're saying that, look, we are going to keep bleeding you, hitting you across the border. We are going to pump in weapons. We're going to, raise these jihadi armies. you can't do a thing to us because your conventional force, which you used against us in 1971 on two fronts, means nothing. We're going to nuke you. And that is when the Indian nuclear weapons program began, and there was a sinking feeling that, we had kind of gone into the slow lane after 1974, and the Indian nuclear weapons program was restarted in the 1980s as a result of what Pakistan had started doing, that they were close to getting the bomb. And now, from the 1980s, you see a pattern of terror attacks, sponsorship of terror inside India, in Punjab first, then in Jammu and Kashmir, and the entire weight of the CIA-sponsored Operation Cyclone. And I've seen this with my own eyes, Shiv, in Jammu and Kashmir in the early days. You're not doing mouse hunts, right? Not chasing 2 or 3 terrorists. There were literally armies of these guys crossing over the border with weapons that were destined for Afghanistan. I've been through godowns filled with 10 and 12,000 AK-47 rifles that in Badami Bagh in 1996, where the army told me that they have enough weapons here to equip an entire infantry division. That is the kind of weaponry that was thrown in against us. And then finally they said, listen, India is not too bothered. Jammu and Kashmir seems to be something that they can handle. Let's explore the Indian hinterland a bit. And that's when 1993 happens, right? The world's largest terror attacks before 9/11, which is basically 13 serial blasts, something like 2 or 3 tons of RDX are sent into Mumbai. They train the underworld. The entire operation is planned by the Pakistan army. They send those explosives. They train Dawood Ibrahim's men to plant those bombs, set off blasts across the city. There's no retaliation. And then they realize, oh my God, we're onto something really big here. We are hitting them with proxies, Dawood Ibrahim in this case. We can keep doing this. So from 1993 to 2008, the Pakistan military attacks us with a vengeance, with the kind of mass casualty attacks that we've never seen before. You have 1993, something like 270 people killed in Mumbai. 2006, the train bombings, where you have serial blasts on 13 local trains, 200 people dead right there. Right up to 26/11, when you had something like 166 Mumbaikars killed. Now, all 3 of these attacks have a very, very familiar pattern. The similarities are that they're all simultaneous, they're all coordinated, they all happen in the span of a few minutes. If you look at it, there's a military mind in all of this. There's a military mind working behind the scenes. The people who actually carry out these attacks are the cutouts, what they call in the intelligence world the cutouts. So in 1993, it will be the Dawood Ibrahim Syndicate. In 2006, it will be Indian Mujahideen. In 26/11, 2008, it's the Lashkar-e-Taiba. But make no mistake about it, it's always the Pakistan military. And Shiv, just to take a few more minutes, it's, I don't know if any of you have seen this movie called The Usual Suspects. It's a brilliant film. Yeah, you know that one, right? Okay, now Chaz Palminteri is this cop who's listening to this conversation from Kevin Spacey, where he keeps telling him the story and he goes on. The movie, I think I'm past the 20-year rule, right? I can't reveal the end, right? Okay, so it's one of the greatest twists in Hollywood, where the guy who keeps saying that I'm this innocent guy, I'm just a bystander, he actually turns out to be the mastermind of the whole thing, right? And he's this villain called Kaiser Soze. And when Chaz Palminteri lets this guy go and he turns around and then he looks at that bulletin board behind him, he has that realization and he drops that coffee cup and smashes on the floor when he realizes, oh my God, this guy was that Kaiser Soze. He was the mastermind and this is the guy we've been looking for all along. So Shiv, my Kaiser Soze moment was when I was writing my second book. I realized, my God, this is what militaries do. This is how they plan this whole thing. The 26/11 plot was nothing but a Pakistan-sponsored attack. And it's very interesting, again, going back to that bulletin board and Chaz Palminteri, the clues are all before us. It's who was David Headley reporting into? who were all the LET fellows reporting to? They were all reporting to the Pakistan military, the Pakistan ISI. They all had handlers. These guys were just cut. How does a terror outfit with no knowledge of the sea or seaborne infiltration tactics suddenly launch an expedition across the sea and come and land right there in Mumbai and launch these attacks with such clinical precision? And the thing against Shiv, this is something we've spoken to them as well. The Marine Commandos, when I interviewed them, they said, "You won't believe it. This is the kind of stuff that we do." And that's when I started dialing back, and all the clues against Shiv, they were all there. The first intelligence reports that came out of 2611, and you know this, it's a very famous story. There were 13 alerts right in the run up to 2611, which the last alert was so specific that it actually said there is a Lashkar-e-Taiba vessel right out there, and it's got terrorists on board, and that was given a pass. So all these alerts kept flowing in, but one of the early alerts was the fact that the Lashkar-e-Taiba was training its commandos in one of the dams in, I think it's Margala Dam in Pakistan, where they were given marine training, right? They were being trained to swim and, you know, do the kind of things that marine commandos do. And that happens to be the exact same place where the Special Services Group, SSG Navy, trains its commandos. So, I mean, it's quite obvious that these guys were being trained by the Special Services Group of Pakistan, the Navy, right? And finally, the last clue is that David Headley, when he talks to the Indian interrogators in 2010, he tells them about this Pakistan Navy frogman who kept meeting them. The guy called Abdur Rahman, who came with all these maps, charts, and plans. And he's telling them how to launch, how to land the thing. So very clearly, Shiv, I mean, 2611, while we all look at it as an LET attack on India, and there's this, Maulana Masood Azhar and Zakiur Rahman Lakwi and all that, these guys are just cutouts. I mean, the main thing, the Kaiser Soze is the Pakistan army, and that is something that we've completely missed out. And this is the fatal mistake that the previous government did, was they did not see this Kaiser Soze, right? And I think that is where things have changed. Just to answer your question, how have things changed now? Today, you have a government that actually understands what's going on, right? It will not say things like a peaceful, progressive, strong, stable Pakistan is in India's interest. No, absolutely not. A strong, prosperous Pakistan will try and cut you and bleed you, just as they've done since 1947. And you're looking at possibly one of the world's longest covert wars. The dates that I gave you, 47, 65, 1999, how could I forget? Those so-called mujahideen that had infiltrated the heights, Northern Light Infantry. They've been at it for the last 75 years. They've expanded this thing of terror into the hinterland. 2611 was the apogee of that. It started in 93, 2006, and finally 2611. But I'm convinced now there's a greater understanding of the threat that they pose. The fact that it's not these cutouts like Lashkar-e-Taiba, and it's not Dawood Ibrahim, it's not Indian Mujahideen, it's the Pakistan army sitting in GHQ Rawalpindi. So that's why I say that, Shiv, again, just to preempt you on the, I'm sure you're going to be asking this question, but what happened in 2019 in Balakot, the surgical strikes, you've written about it. The biggest thing there was that the government understood what was going on, right? The bombs may have exploded in Balakot, but the impact was felt in Rawalpindi, in General Headquarters Rawalpindi. They understood, look, these guys kind of figure that we are the real villains, so the next bomb might actually land on our headquarters here in Rawalpindi. So let's just, stay off a bit. So I think that is the kind of change in attitude that's happened, Shiv, in the last 15 years, from just kind of, stumbling in the dark and feeling different sides of the elephant, and the Lashkar-e-Taiba side and the Jaish-e-Mohammed side and the Indian Mujahideen side, to finally seeing the elephant for what it is.
I think, just to reinforce what Sandeep said, he made two really, really important points, and I'll reinforce them because I want this audience to, to believe it and think about it a little bit. If you look at Pakistan media now, if you look at Pakistan, both their mainstream conventional media as well as social media, at least once a week, there's a discussion on Pakistani news television about Balakot. Okay, even now, all these years later, there's discussion, there is chatter about Balakot, and you won't see too many Indians talking about it. I think the last time an Indian spoke about Balakot is when I wrote about it in my book. But the point that Sandeep was making, which is that the bombs may have fallen in Balakot, but the effect, the psychological effects of it were felt in Rawalpindi and in Islamabad, and that was the real purpose. The purpose was not about killing 400 terrorists in some obscure training camp in Balakot. It was about how it was going to introduce a new era of sleeplessness in Pakistan over what can happen if they try to do anything. If they mount an attack, who knows where the next bomb is going to land, like Sandeep said. The second point that Sandeep said, and I'm going to press you a little bit more on that, Sandeep, is that the view of terrorism, Pakistan-sponsored terrorism, it's going to require a sort of cultural mindset shift for all of us to stop looking at it as terrorism. This is literally the Pakistan military. These are Pakistan military trained people. In the space that Sandeep and I occupy, there are various different definitions. There are hybrid terrorists, and there are BAT action teams, border action teams, Pakistan army helping terrorists come across the border. These guys are all military personnel, okay? For all practical purposes and in the way that we must regard them, none of these people are jihadis in that way that we think about it. These are all professionally military trained soldiers. If you talk about the Uri surgical strikes, which has become kind of the face of how India has responded, those launch pads and those places are fully fledged military style training camps where these people were getting real training. If you strip 2611 down, and Sandeep is one person who can appreciate this, if you remove all the emotions and the sense of hurt as an Indian when you think about 2611, if you remove all those all the sentimentalism around 2611, what the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Pakistan military managed to achieve was genius. What they managed to achieve was an extremely difficult thing against a well-guarded a country with many professional forces, with multiple layers of security, with an intelligence setup that was practically blaring alerts 13 different times. For all of that to fall into place, for the stars to be completely aligned, and for 10 people to be able to come in and kill 184 citizens, Indians and others in Mumbai, it really emphasizes the level of the commitment to that kind of violence. That's what you're actually dealing with. You're dealing with a machinery that is unwaveringly focused on your destruction. It is unwaveringly focused on finding your gaps, constantly testing you. It is patient. It has the will to, draw it out for many years to find where your gaps are and then hit where it hurts. And that's really what happened in Mumbai. There's a famous story, Sandeep, of course, which is, well, it's not a story, it's facts, because you also touched upon that, which is that after 2611, famously, there was the possibility of retaliatory attacks by India, where the Indian Air Force chief at that time, Air Chief Ali Major, had presented the then government with a list of possible targets and an airstrike retaliatory package, as it were, which didn't happen for many reasons, including some of the things that you said. But in Balakot, it did happen. What was that because of? What changed? Yes, the government recognized that it was the Pakistan military that was responsible and not these ragtag terrorist groups who otherwise have no strength. Without the Pakistan military, the Lashkar-e-Taiba is nothing. What is it that changed that allowed a different dispensation to take the kind of action that was involved in Balakot? Because the risks were exactly the same.
Right. Very good question, Shiv. And in fact, the answer is that I think this government, firstly, the Pakistan nuclear weapons program, who is it aimed at? It's not aimed at the Indian military, right? The Pakistani nuclear weapons are political weapons. They're aimed at the Indian politicians, the Indian decision makers. The Indian military is trained to fight through a nuclear conflict, right? They have all kinds of training, NBCD training and all of that. They're prepared to fight through a nuclear fallout. It is the Indian politician whom the Pakistan military has targeted with their nuclear weapons. It's introduced that sense of doubt in them that if you undertake any cross-border attack on us, we are going to drop you. We're going to nuke you. That is the kind of instability equation that, a mad, irrational actor equation that they introduced. Now, in 2019, 26/11, the elephant in the room was the Pakistani nuclear weapons program and the Pakistani bomb. While there were options, firstly, no one was prepared to launch attacks, surgical so-called airstrikes on Pakistani militant training camps at short notice, right? There was no preparation, there was no planning, nothing like that. There had been some talk of it around 2001 or so, but it wasn't really action on the ground. By action on the ground, you have the Air Force that's ready, prepared, it's got all the targets, it's got mock things, the way the Israelis do it. They prepare for their thing. They have multiple sorties. They have the right ordnance, the weaponry. The pilots are all trained, ready to go. The minute the signal is given, they go out, fly, hit the targets, and come back. In this case, there was no such planning. And the elephant in the room, Shiv, was the Pakistani bomb. So there was a sense of, there were the politicians. I spoke to people who were in that room where there were two crucial meetings, one while the attacks were on and one soon after the attacks, by which time it was amply clear that this was a Pakistani attack. Make no mistake, the Pakistanis have gone through extraordinary lengths to conceal this operation, right from putting red threads on the hands of the terrorists, giving them identity cards with Hindu names. It's a perfect deception plan of the kind that you've seen during the Second World War, right? When the Allies planted that body, you remember, with the fake invasion plan papers. They had worked it out to a T. The only thing that exposed them was firstly that boat, which didn't sink, which had the GPS fixes and the satellite phone, and finally, living evidentiary proof, Ajmal Kasab, who just blurted out the whole operation. Now, when the politicians and the military were discussing this option of retaliating, striking back, the only person in that room who actually stood up and said was the Air Force chief. He said, look, I'm ready to go and attack them. Just give me the coordinates. And they found, to their horror, that they didn't have the coordinates of any of those camps. And the coordinates, some of them were apparently on Indian territory as well. It was all haphazard. It was shocking. It was chaotic. And Shiv, you've reported 26/11 from the ground. You know the kind of utter chaos that was there while the attacks were playing out. It's ridiculous. It was like, there were senior personnel who were touring the place with their wives while the attacks were on. No one was in command. There were some 3, 4, 5 multiple centers. Television was covering it in real time. It's absolutely horrible. We are from the media, Shiv. We have to acknowledge the fact that we goofed up big time on 26/11. We didn't know what was going on. We were actually broadcasting those operations live. We should never have done that. We actually gave the LET and the Pakistan Army, we were like CCTV cameras for them, right? Horrible. Now, a lot of these things kind of inhibited their reaction, and the primary reason being the bomb. Now, what has changed in Balakot in 2019 was the fact that the political establishment, the military establishment, the national security establishment in the current dispensation understood what is called the escalatory ladder, right? You don't throw nuclear weapons at each other for, jets crossing the border. The Pakistanis didn't attack you for Balakot. They sent a retaliatory strike with fighter jets, right? They also missed their target. So they were kind of signaling to us. So there was a kind of sense on our side that we knew what the threshold was, whether it was left to us, whether we wanted to escalate beyond that once the Pakistani jets had crossed over. We lost a pilot there. We worked really hard to get him back. That was in 48 hours. It was amazing, the kind of diplomacy that went into securing the release of Wing Commander Abhinandan Varthaman. So here, for the first time, you had a government that was fully aware of this escalatory ladder. It knew the threshold. It knew what it had to do. It had the entire script of this worked out, right down to the logic of attacking that particular camp. It had been under surveillance. And Shiv, let's not forget that the Balakot attack, you've written this yourself, wasn't an overnight operation. It had been several months in the preparations. There had been plans for it, and finally, when the order to the Air Force was given, they had been planning for it for several days, right? But the most important thing, Shiv, here again is the political resolve, right? That, to my mind, is the most important thing. It's not about how many jets you have, or how many soldiers you have, or how many bombs you have, or the size of the bomb, or the length of the gun, or the barrel. It's all about the fight in the political establishment. What are they planning to do? What do they plan to do to take the fight across into the enemy camp? And I think this we demonstrated after a very, very long time, after several decades of being paralyzed because of the fear of Pakistani nukes being tossed across the border. And that is primarily what has changed. But like you correctly pointed out, Shiv, you're up against a foe that's like a literal machine. Christine Fair has written this beautiful book called Fighting to the End, which is a history of the Pakistan army, that the Pakistan army has been, it's one of the most saddest and most unfortunate armies in the world. It has lost every war it has fought in the last 76 years. It has been defeated repeatedly. It's been paraded. It's done instruments of surrender of the kind that have not been seen since the Second World War in 71, Dhaka. But yet it continues, it keeps on fighting, it's always looking for opportunities, weaknesses. Can we do this? Can we do that? They just believe in fighting to the end. And this, Shiv, is one reason why, if someone were to ask me today, which is the bigger threat militarily, as in terror and national security, is it China or is it Pakistan? I would still say it is Pakistan. Despite the fact that we are on the moon today, Pakistan is in the toilet, but you still have the Pakistan army that's still in charge, right? They have a caretaker prime minister, Shiv. You know that, right? They've always had a caretaker prime minister. Forever, right? It's always the military who runs the show. And that military general who rules Pakistan has been, it's just the names change, the faces change, but the intent, like you so correctly put out, is always the same. It's always to destroy, destabilize, attack India. Continue that war of 1,000 cuts.
It's a low investment, high rate of return sort of machine that Pakistan has. I wanted to show you a couple of small examples on the point that Sandeep just made on political resolve. Because one of the questions that one is often answered is, why can't we do the same thing to Pakistan? Why can't we have hybrid warriors and send them across? Simplistic questions, but in my view, there is no such thing as a simplistic question, because this is something that it pains a lot of people, and they actually want to know, if we are such a powerful country, if we've got such a vast defense budget, if we spend so many billions every year purchasing the most advanced aircraft and submarines and ships, etc., why do we keep getting whacked in this manner? And of course, they're talking about terror attacks and the 1,000 cuts, etc. I just wanted to bear with me as I just give you a small little list, not the kind of list you're thinking of, but a slightly better list. Okay, this is a report that my colleague Arvind Oja filed just a few days ago. Okay, so I'm going to sorry, just bear with me, it's just coming up in front of me. Yeah, this is a report that he put together a few days ago. It's and he's a fantastic reporter. His area is crime and terror and things like that, and he likes doing these these sort of lofty, is there a pattern in what's happening kind of pieces. Okay, and he just looked at data over the last couple of years. Now, we all know who Maulana Masood Azhar and our friend from the Lashkar-e-Taiba who was responsible for 2611 and all those most wanted terrorists of India. So he sat down with his data and he said, hey, it's weird how among the 15 most wanted terrorists of India on the list, 8 have mysteriously died in the last 2 years, and all of them have died in their safe havens. In their safe havens, not in India, not while traveling, all in their safe havens. Small little example. A guy called Rayaz Ahmad alias Abu Qasim. Uh, this is a guy who has been one of the most wanted Lashkar terrorists. He was found in a pool of blood in a mosque in POK just on September the 8th. Okay. Next example is Maulana Masood Azhar, who is the founder of the Jaish-e-Mohammed. Very few know that in Peshawar, not very long ago, there was a massive blast and he escaped by the skin of his teeth. Bashir Ahmed Peer, again very recently, commander of the Hizbul Mujahideen terror outfit, met with a, and I like how my colleague uses this phrase, met with a tragic end. Okay. He was along with Syed Salahuddin, who escaped very closely. 2-3 more examples. Al-Badr commander Syed Khalid Raza and Jaish-e-Mohammed's Mistri Zahur Ibrahim. These, you can Google these names. They're on our most wanted terror list. Both of these shot dead in separate attacks in Karachi. Who are their enemies in Karachi? One wonders. Okay. Khalistan Commando Force Chief Paramjeet Singh Panjwar, also known as Malik Sardar Singh, gunned down in Lahore. I mean, these guys have the best protection in these places. So who's killing them? I'm not going to say it, but let people wonder who is it? Is it factions? Do they have have they made enemies between terror groups? Is it somebody from outside? Who knows? Lal Mohammed, suspected ISI operative involved in counterfeit Indian currency, which is a huge element of Pakistani terror against India, economic terror against India. Found shot dead on the outskirts of Kathmandu. He was in Kathmandu doing something, shot dead over there. Hardeep Singh Nijjar, famous Khalistani terrorist, shot dead in Surrey in Canada. Lahore, Karachi, Bahawalpur, Surrey, Canada. These are like terrorist hubs. These are places where you can't find a place where terrorists can be safer. And these guys have been killed over there. Now, I'm not saying there's a pattern. You want to think there's a pattern? That's fine. Then we'll take Q&A right after this. So I'm just saying,
it's shocking. I mean, it's the worst time to be a terrorist in Pakistan. It seems like no safety of life.
If Glory will be kind and give us 10 minutes, because so many people are going to whack me if we don't take questions now. No, I wasn't. I promise.
He was bringing them. He was herding the audience in.
We have more to talk about, but we'll cover those things in the Q&A if possible. Yeah, the young man there, the check shirt.
Hello, sir. You had mentioned the important dates like 1979, Soviet invasion of Afghan and all that. This was also the time when Khalistani insurgency was at its peak in India. Could Pakistan played any role in it? That is my question.
Yeah, it did. It's very well known. They had what is called a K2. It's colloquially referred to as a K2 plan for Khalistan and for Kashmir. So it was all General Zia, right? This guy was one of the most malevolent guys, and the kind of end that he met is kind of fully deserved of what he kind of did. And it's that crate of mangoes that you have to be thankful for. But that was entirely this entire thing of terror and nuclear weapons that was put into place by General Zia, and of course, like you mentioned, the Punjab insurgency and all was practically his.
On the 26/11, there's a book called Who Killed Karkare. It's written by S.M. Mushrif, who was, I think, like one of the senior police officers in S.M. Mushrif, Who Killed Karkare. And he actually blames like what is called a Brahminical forces in the police who knew about all these things that are happening. And they planted, they had a vehicle in there, that Skoda vehicle, in their stock, and they use that this thing. I mean, it was so blatant what was written in it. I was like, when I read it, I was aghast. I made a small note and I gave it to the Maharashtra government. Okay, when in the
There was
previous
a
government.
so I mean, just to
Yeah.
answer your question, there was, as part of this, there was a deception plan as part of 2611. It's a very elaborate deception plan, and the idea was for all the 10 terrorists to be killed,
Yeah.
right? And they would be found with these ID cards and the red threads, and they would have these fake names. And the whole purpose of that deception plan was to make it look like Indians had carried out the attack. They were basically Indian youth who had attacked their own countrymen. And they were basically supposed to destroy all evidence and then, die fighting. And then they would be, their bodies would be discovered, and they would say that, and there would be a lot of this literature that you mentioned. I'm not sure if Mr. Mushrif's book is part of that, but there was a lot of literature that mysteriously appeared around or just immediately after the 2611 attacks, which said it was a conspiracy, it was all Indians, it was right-wing forces that carried out this attack, and all of that.
You had Digvijay Singh releasing a
correct.
book about Hindu
Yeah.
terror right after 2611 and
So-
talking about it. So you didn't even need the Pakistanis to do it.
So I'm not sure if all of this is part of that deception plan, because all of this takes time to build up, research. It takes a lot of time to research a book and produce it. But there was a lot of books that suddenly appeared after 2611, which started saying the Indian state was behind these attacks and all of that. And that book, like you said, is one of them.
I have a question. RVS Mani was the only officer present in Home Ministry at that point of time, I think. And what he says is that purposefully the investigation after this incident was given to CID, which was not equipped to handle this kind of investigation, having multinational links. And it is a small force which can investigate probably any gruesome murder in Mumbai or things like that. So was it the deliberate plan, or what were the outcome of the investigation, or those things implemented?
No,
Extend into that, is it Colonel Purohit's arrest, who was arrested before this attack happened, is it linked to that? At the same time, Karkare was actually the first one to be killed even before the assault was started. So was it that he knew something too much, that's why he was eliminated by...
the conspiracy, I don't buy that very much. So, but I'll just answer your question about the what you just said.
Can you just listen
So-
to another question and take them together?
Yeah. Oh, you run out of time? Oh, okay.
Very
Sorry.
quick, fun question.
Yeah, okay. So
Yeah.
I'll just very quickly answer that question. It was, look, it's when you don't understand the disease, the remedy that you prescribe is going to be wrong, right? They dealt with 2611, the intelligence alerts that were being sent by the CIA to RNAW and then passed on to the IB were coming down to DCP Zone 1. It's almost like DCP Zone 1 is supposed to, protect the international boundaries. This was a cross-border military-sponsored attack. The DCP can't do anything. Similarly, it was, appalling that an investigation of this nature should be handed over to the Maharashtra government. It should have been investigated at the very highest level in Delhi. All of those facts that Mr. Mani mentioned, and he's on record saying that he's written books where he says that the entire Home Ministry team that's gone to Pakistan to debate a counter-terrorism thing. It doesn't get more ironical than this. They've gone to Pakistan to talk about counter-terrorism. They are held hostage over there in a place where all the decision makers of the MHA are, they don't have access to phones, right? So this is to ensure that those guys had a free run for the first 24 hours at least. They could butcher the maximum number of people. The toll for 2611, but for the intervention of the Marine Commandos, would have been in excess of 200 or 300 people dead. Oh, okay, right. Well, yeah, I'll take your questions outside. Thank you. I respect you. Absolutely. Before I go, the most important word spoken on the night of 2611 was spoken by a sub-inspector of the Mumbai police. He said in Marathi, "Yala maru nako, ya evidence ahe." He was so correct in what he said.